If you shoot film, you're going to want to get your negatives into your computer at some point. Here's how I do it. There are many different film formats and different ways of digitizing film so you can share your images with your clients and post them on social media. I've tried different methods over the years, and I'd like to share with you what my process has evolved into. The easiest way to get your negatives into your computer is to have the lab that processed your film scan them. Whether you take your film to a local lab for developing or send it out to a service you found online, there's going to be a box you can check to have them perform that service. The benefits of having a lab scan your negatives are that it's going to be the fastest and least expensive way to go. You don't have to invest in any hardware or software yourself. And unless you're scanning a lot of film, it's going to be cheaper, at least in the short term. There are some strings attached to having a lab scan your negatives. There are a lot of variables in regard to the quality of the scans you're going to get back. This can vary depending upon the scanner itself, the software being used, and the skill and experience of the person doing the scanning. The scans tend to be fairly basic. You're going to get an image you can work with, but might not have the color accuracy nor dynamic range you'll find if you did the work yourself. They're also going to be a basic, though in my experience, still usable size. When you reach a point where you want more control over the scanning process so you can get a higher quality end product, you're going to need to bring that step in-house. I already had a flatbed scanner from back in the day, and it turns out I made a wise choice with the now discontinued Epson Perfection V550 Photo. The YouTube tutorials I watched on flatbed scanner negative capture often use this model or one more recent. It's by no means the only option, though. While the results from the scanner were higher quality and larger than the ones I'd received from the lab, there were still some limitations. First, the process was really slow. The idea of scanning every frame was out the window because it took the scanner way too long to do. My compromise was to use the lab scans as a contact sheet to decide which frames I wanted to scan at a higher quality myself. I also had to buy third-party scanning software because of a limitation in the Epson software that just wasn't working for me, so I did have to spend a little money on top of a process that proved to be pretty time-consuming. The next step up would be camera scanning. If I could use my Canon R5 to capture my negatives, all the color accuracy, dynamic range, sharpness, and physical size of the files would blow away any previous method I had tried. The big kid on the block for camera scanning, and the one I saw most frequently on YouTube, is Negative Supply Company. The ecosystem they offer for allowing you to use a digital camera to capture film negatives is pretty robust. Unfortunately, there were some aspects of the system that wouldn't work for me, primarily because their setup attaches your camera to what is effectively a copy stand, and the footprint for this thing can be pretty big. You can't see my whole office through my videos, but I don't really have the space to set up something like this. Sure, I can take it down when I'm not using it and set it back up when I'm ready to scan again, but that's more effort than I want to put into this thing every time I want to scan a roll of film. If a process isn't fun, or if it's kind of a slog, I'm less inclined to do it. It's not laziness, it's time management. Secondly, it's expensive. They do have different kits and a la carte items where you can mix and match parts at different price points, but for the setup I would want to scan the different formats of film that I shoot, the whole thing would run me about $1,000. They have options where you can spend both more and less than that, but the price combined with the time it would take to precisely line the camera with the scanning surface each time and the footprint of the unit itself make it an unsuitable option for me. Eventually, while continuing to research camera scanning, I settled upon these, the Valoi EZ35 and EZ120. As the name implies, one is for 35mm film and the other is for 120 film. However, you can swap out the film carrier in each to accommodate other film formats. When I got the EZ35, the EZ120 wasn't yet a thing, so I resigned myself to continuing to scan 120 film on the Epson. Then this became available, and now I'm all in on this system. If you're starting from scratch and you only need 35mm or smaller formats, the EZ35 is the clear choice. If you're shooting 120 film, then the EZ120 is the way to go. There's now a 35mm film carrier available for the EZ120, so at this point, that's all you really need. As you can see, the EZ35 is much smaller than the EZ120, so if I'm scanning 35mm or smaller film, I'm still going to use this one. The footprint on these is pretty reasonable. I can do this right on my desk. And when I'm done with them, I wrap them each in an old hand towel so they won't get scuffed and keep them in a tote off to the side. At the time I'm putting this video together, the price point for the EZ35 is $264, with the EZ120 coming in at $631. With each, this gets you an LED light source, a film carrier for either 35mm or 120 film, and a series of metal extension tubes to get you just the right framing for the camera with a film carrier. Finally, they provide a series of extension tubes that connect the metal rings to the lens. They give you a lot of these things to accommodate what I assume is almost any variable in camera and lens you can bring to the table. Believe me, it's much simpler than it sounds. Then if you'd like, you can add different options like this duster, which the film slides through before going into the carrier. I added one of these to each system because if I can remove as much dust as I can before scanning, that's less I have to retouch later. Removing dust from scanned negatives is a pain. I also added carriers for 110 film and 35mm film that show the sprocket holes. There are other formats available, but that's all I felt I needed for now. These range in price from $35 to $52. The Easy 120 comes with a carrier to accommodate a 6x9 120 film negative, so if I have a camera that shoots 6x9 or anything smaller, including square, I can use the same carrier and just crop the image area once it's on my computer. Once you have everything set up, you don't really have to change anything. They recommend changing the length of these tubes depending on the size of the film you're capturing. The idea being filling the frame with a negative so you get the largest file you can. It can be a little tricky to precisely align the individual metal tubes so they screw together, so I'm really not inclined to keep changing them out. I agree that the largest file you can get while capturing your film is optimum, but my R5 is a 50 megapixel camera, so even if I have this set up for 35mm film negatives, if I have to crop down because I'm scanning 110 film, for example, I'm still left with a significant amount of data to work with. I'm personally not worried about it. Okay, so you have the story of my evolution of why I digitize negatives the way I do and the tools I use to do so. I'm going to break this process and methodology into a few videos to make it easier to digest. In my next video, I'll specifically show you how I use the EZ35 and EZ120 to digitize my film negatives. I'll show you the devices in detail, a couple of tricks I learned about using them, and get specific with the camera settings I use to get the best exposure I can when capturing my negatives. I'll also show you how I organize my negatives once they're scanned. I hope you found this background information educational and a good primer for getting our hands dirty with the actual digitizing process. I'll leave links below for the products I discussed in this video if you'd like to check them out for yourself. See you in the next one. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your spending a few minutes with me. If you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. This is Ask a Wedding Photographer. I'm Seth K, and I'm here to help.